In the early light of a crisp autumn morning, the ancient courthouse stood as a solemn monument to justice, a building whose venerable walls had silently witnessed countless triumphs and defeats over the centuries. As Karoline Leavitt approached the heavy oak doors, the entire edifice seemed to hum with anticipation. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns upon polished marble floors, while the faint aroma of old leather-bound books mingled with the cool air. Every detail, the soft creak of wooden benches, the hushed whispers of law interns and reporters, and even the distant echo of footsteps, set the stage for a historic confrontation. Karoline, a young attorney renowned for her meticulous preparation and unyielding determination, stepped into the grand courtroom with a purposeful stride. Every eye in the room, ranging from seasoned legal veterans to eager students, was fixed upon her. In that moment, it wasn't merely her presence that commanded attention. It was the silent declaration that the old order was about to be challenged by the force of a new, fearless voice. As she moved toward the defense table, her hands gripped a neatly organized folder containing hours of research, legal precedents, and carefully drafted arguments. This case was far more than a dispute over contractual obligations. It was a battleground where truth, accountability, and the sanctity of written promises would be fiercely defended. Across the courtroom sat Richard Calloway, a veteran litigator known for his theatrical flair and razor-sharp wit. His confident smile and dismissive glances betrayed his certainty that his years of experience would be enough to overpower Karoline's youthful vigor. Yet, beneath that veneer of assured superiority lay a subtle unease, a hint that his carefully rehearsed arguments might be unprepared for the storm of truth that Karoline was about to unleash. At the bench, Judge Walter Grayson maintained a stern yet watchful demeanor. Initially, his eyes revealed a trace of condescension as he regarded the young attorney. But as the proceedings unfolded, even he could not help but be drawn into the force of her argument. The session began with Calloway delivering an opening statement that portrayed his client as the victim of corporate betrayal. His words, polished and authoritative, reverberated around the room like a well-practiced melody. However, as he spoke, Karoline's steady gaze never wavered from the judge's face. She was silently measuring every flicker of expression, every twitch of the seasoned jurist's eyes, seeking any sign that the tides might be turning in favor of justice. When her moment arrived, Karoline rose slowly and with measured poise. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm yet resolute. While the opposing counsel has woven an emotional narrative designed to sway sentiment, the facts, and indeed the law, paint a very different picture. With that single sentence, the courtroom seemed to pause, as though the very air was waiting for her next words. Every syllable was delivered with precision, each backed by countless hours of study and a deep-seated belief in fairness. Karoline methodically began to dismantle the opposing arguments, citing landmark cases and demonstrating how a company that voluntarily imposes strict conditions in its contracts must, by that very act, be held accountable to those commitments. As she unfolded her argument, her voice grew stronger with every point made. The legal precedents she referenced were not mere citations. They were the bricks with which she built a compelling fortress of logic and morality. When an employer commits in writing to specific standards, she asserted, it must honor them. To fail in doing so is not merely a legal oversight. It is a betrayal of the trust placed in them by every individual who depends on those promises. With every well-articulated point, the atmosphere in the courtroom transformed. The once dismissive murmur of skeptics grew quiet, replaced by the palpable hum of anticipation. Even Calloway's confident demeanor began to falter under the weight of irrefutable evidence and the clarity of Karoline's insight. His carefully rehearsed rebuttals, once delivered with ease, now stumbled in the wake of her relentless pursuit of truth. Meanwhile, Judge Grayson, whose initial impatience had bordered on disdain, found his stern countenance softening into one of contemplative respect. The judge's pen, which had tapped rhythmically on the bench during the earlier proceedings, now lay silent as if pausing to absorb the gravity of the arguments presented. In a pivotal moment that sent shockwaves through the gallery, Karoline directly challenged Calloway. "Do you have, Mr. Calloway, the documented evidence to prove that your client has met these strict contractual standards?" The question, posed with quiet intensity, hung in the air like a gauntlet. For a long, agonizing moment, Calloway's facade of assurance cracked, and the murmurs of the audience deepened. His stack of documents seemed suddenly inadequate against the tide of Karoline's meticulously presented facts. The courtroom, once echoing with the clamor of legal jargon, now resonated with the quiet power of truth. As the debate escalated, emotions ran high. Karoline's eyes, shining with the fire of conviction, recounted stories of everyday individuals wronged by institutions that had once vowed to protect them. Her narrative bridged the gap between abstract legal principles and the stark realities of human suffering and hope. In those moments, the courtroom was transformed from a sterile arena of legal procedures into a vibrant stage where the battle for justice was fought not only with words and evidence, but with the heart and soul of every person who had ever believed in fairness. Gradually, the relentless tide of Karoline's argument began to erode the defenses of the opposition. Judge Grayson's gaze shifted noticeably as he absorbed each piece of evidence. His earlier skepticism was replaced by an unmistakable recognition that the company's failure to adhere to its own written commitments was not a trivial matter. It was a fundamental breach of trust. The judge's measured voice eventually broke through the tension. In reviewing the evidence presented, it is clear that the contractual obligations set forth by the company have not been honored. When an entity commits to a standard in writing, it must be bound by that promise. His words, resonant and final, sent a shiver of anticipation through the room. The final moments of the trial unfolded with an almost cinematic quality. The silence that followed the judge's declaration was thick with emotion, every attendee feeling the weight of the historic decision. The gavel's final strike was not only a legal pronouncement, it was a resounding affirmation of accountability and the triumph of truth over complacency. As murmurs of approval and whispered expressions of admiration filled the gallery, it became evident that this case would be remembered not merely for its legal implications, but for the transformative moment when a determined voice had redefined the boundaries of justice. Karoline, standing resolute at the defense table, allowed herself no moment of self-satisfaction. Instead, her eyes swept the room, silently urging every onlooker to reflect on their own capacity for courage. As she gathered her documents and prepared to leave, the courtroom seemed to exhale a collective breath of hope. Outside, the cool evening air embraced her like a promise of new beginnings. The fading sunlight painted the horizon in hues of amber and gold, and the steady rhythm of the city's heartbeat echoed the enduring message of that day. Every promise must be kept, every commitment honored. In the days and weeks that followed, Karoline Levitt's case ignited conversations in legal circles, academic forums, and on social media platforms. Law journals dissected her arguments, and young attorneys found inspiration in her unwavering commitment to accountability. The courthouse, once a silent witness to tradition, had become a beacon for change, a testament to the belief that justice is not a static ideal, but an evolving pursuit shaped by the courage of those willing to stand against the tide of indifference. As time passed, Karoline's journey continued to inspire. Invitations to speak at seminars, panel discussions, and workshops poured in, each opportunity serving as a reminder that the quest for justice is an ongoing battle. In every lecture and every public appearance, she reiterated the simple yet powerful truth that had carried her through the trial. True justice is crafted with integrity, perseverance, and the unwavering belief that every individual has the power to make a difference. Now, as the courthouse stands silent once again, its ancient walls still echoing with the legacy of that historic day, the call to action remains as potent as ever. It is a call for each of us to examine our own convictions, to challenge the status quo, and to ensure that the principles of fairness and accountability are never compromised. The story of Karoline Leavitt and her landmark victory is a timeless reminder that the voice of justice, when raised in earnest, can alter the course of history. Have you ever felt the stirring of truth within your heart? Will you be the one to stand up when promises are broken, to challenge an outdated system, and to let your voice be heard? The legacy of that day endures in every act of courage, every fight for what is right, and every moment when the human spirit refuses to be silenced. The voice of justice speaks, not only through the echoes of courtrooms past, but in every individual determined to write a new chapter in the ongoing story of truth and accountability.